Welcome to the second movie. I know that first one was so boring. They're going to get better, I promise. Sitting and listening to a movie on preferences? I can't imagine. But it's important. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't important. And it's my job to bore you, right? No. It's my job to turn you on to this amazing world of digital illustration. All right, so this one, it's still going to be a little boring, but you're going to watch it. We're going to talk about the interface of Illustrator and Artboards, setting up a new project. So we've got Illustrator open, and it's just sitting there. We can't really do anything until we get a new document open. So the way we'll do that is we go to File, New, and when you go to the new document window, you're presented with some options here. The first thing is to name your document, and half the people at this point who use a program like this would name their document, and half the people wouldn't. At some point, you're going to name it. It doesn't really matter when you do it. Is it a good habit to name it now? Not necessarily. Half the time we start a new document and we don't really know what we're going to do anyways, so it's kind of hard to define it by a name. I'm going to opt to leave it as untitled. Underneath this little name deal, we have a new document profile. Profile basically just means a preset. And when you look under the profile, we're presented with 8. Is that 8? That's 7. 7 options. Print, web, mobile and devices, video and film, basic CMYK, basic RGB, and flash catalyst. It's funny, I've never even looked at that one before. That was the first time I've ever looked at it, acknowledged it, and actually said those words out loud. So that must mean that we're probably not going to do anything this semester using flash catalyst. And yeah, that's a good assumption. If you were to go to a print preset, basically all that does is change our options under size, letter, legal, tabloid, and then the A's and the B's. Letter is your typical 8.5 by 11 page size. Legal is 8.5 by 14. And tabloid is 11 by 17. So a lot of times when we're doing design work, we're doing a poster or a flyer or some sort of program. And if it's something like that that's going to be printed, then it makes sense to go to the print presets. And generally, we're trying to print something that is of the size of a piece of paper that would be printed on either at a local print shop or on your laser printer or desktop printer, whatever. Anytime you choose one of these different print presets, basically it changes our width and height. So you can see that it's getting a little taller because that's 8.5 by 14, and then tabloid. But these don't, this point business doesn't really make sense. We're looking at the units that are points. You said, well, I'm not familiar with points. Let's make a little more sense out of this. If you go to your units, you could choose a pica. Why? I don't know. Don't really know why you choose a pica. I mean, some people use picas, but whatever. It's nonsense. Inches or pixels are generally what make most sense to most designers. Inches or pixels. So if we went to inches, at that point you'd see that we're dealing with the 8.5 by 11. And if you went to pixels, this is the same as a point. A point is a print term. A pixel is more of a computer term. So whatever your fancy is, it's actually not bad to know some of these dimensions and how they translate from inches to pixels. But whatever, you're printing, you're dealing with paper. then you should think inches. At least that's my way of going about this. So as soon as I've gone in and changed things, it changed the document profile to custom, because I've sort of customizing the settings for this thing. So that's print. If we went to web, then we're dealing with different size presets: 640 by 480, 800 by 600, 1024 by 768. Those are very general and more or less outdated options for doing some web page design and layout. Basically targeting different monitor resolutions, and I'm really surprised that at this point with CS5 for this day and age that they haven't included a more updated selection of monitor resolutions. But whatever, you see that it now defaults to units being pixels. Because we're dealing with web world, we're thinking of computer monitors and displays, and those resolutions deal with pixels. We're not dealing with points of or dots of ink at this point. Well, there's a lot of the use of the word point in that sense. So those are your options for the web. Mobile and devices, now we have different sizes for different screens of things. Basically, we're talking about phones. Well, yeah, we're talking about phones. So these are different screen resolutions for different phones. Still in the world of pixels, since we're dealing with screens. Video and film, our size options are now quite a handful. NTSC DV, widescreen, D1 widescreen, we get into PAL, we get HD formats, DVC Pro HD formats, and then get into film. Any of these different settings are just going to change the width and height of pixels, because again we're dealing with screens, and screens use pixels. So these are some nice presets to jump to if you're working in the film or video world, preparing work for animation, maybe in After Effects, whatever. So then after film and video, we have a basic CMYK, which is just whatever. It's basic. Still CMYK, which means it's going to be targeted towards print, and at some point we'll talk about CMYK and RGB. Whoa, Flash Catalyst. Didn't mean to go there. Basic RGB is the world of the computer screen or the television screen. Pixels, we work with RGB, red, green, and blue. Every pixel on your computer screen can turn on or off a red, blue, or green light, and that's how we end up getting all that amazing texture and color and gradients and details and all that stuff. But there's really, I've been working in Illustrator for many, many years, and well, all this stuff is kind of new as far as their options here, but I've never needed to use any of these. I usually just go right to print if it's something that I'm working on for print, or I do a lot of animation work and motion graphics, and I use video and film. Notice, however, that I've got this little advanced area opened up at the bottom. You can open or collapse that thing, and when it's open, you can see a few things about color mode and raster effects. And under print profiles, my color mode is defaulted to CMYK. As soon as I move into the world of web, mobile devices, video, and film, my color mode is RGB. So Illustrator is basically looking out for us, making sure that we're in a color mode or profile that will be compatible for the outputted product, the means of either printing or projection onto a monitor. So that's something that's happening in the background. If advanced is closed, you just don't know that's going on. I'm a big fan of being aware of what's going on, and I try to get all my students to get in the habit of diving deeper and being more aware of what's happening in the background. So things like the advanced tab, whatever, opening that up and just having it there is good, a good little reminder, and something for us just to double check and make sure that it's correct for the job that we're about to get into. So those are all of our presets and the effect on size and the effect on color mode. I guess one more thing I'll say is notice raster effects ends up changing resolution between print, web, mobile devices, video, and film. It's we're talking about how many pixels per inch are going to be crammed into our design. And so if we're printing, we want to have a lot. And 300 pixels per inch is very decent and looks marvelous when printed. You can get up to like 1200 or higher, but that's just sort of ridiculous as far as resolution goes. And then it's not really saying that our resolution in this document is going to be 72 or 300. If you've done any work in Photoshop, that's one of the things that you have to figure out when you're setting up a new document is you have to choose your resolution. And that actually is something that's set in stone because you're dealing with a raster or pixel-based program. Illustrator, however, is a vector-based program dealing with points, coordinates, and mathematical values. And resolution really doesn't matter. It's resolution independent, is what they call Illustrator. However, the raster effects means things like drop shadows, glows, different effects that you could apply to either your vector artwork or even photos or things that you might be placing in a document in Illustrator that come from Photoshop or something like that. It's just how is it going to treat it, the drop shadow? How tight will that shadow be in its detail? In a print file, you want that detail to be really tight, and in a screen project for web or video, it doesn't need to be as tight because the screen resolution for our monitors and television sets and whatnot is at 72. So it sort of dumbs those things down a bit, but they still look great. That's what's going on here. You're not actually setting the resolution for your project because there's no such thing in Illustrator. All right, so if we kind of come back and notice I jumped over something called artboards, number of artboards. You can create as many artboards in an Illustrator document as you would like. And this is relatively new. I think it's 3 versions old. I think it started in CS2. But basically an artboard is a workspace within your document. And it's a workspace that is defined by the size of the preset that you've chosen. So if I'm in print preset and I have my size set to letter and I have one artboard, the result is going to be, and I'll just go ahead and do this now, I'll hit OK. A document, here's my document, and here is the 8.5 by 11 artboard that I have created. And the artboard means that whatever artwork, be it text or graphics, boxes, lines, whatever, and images, will be bound by the edges of this artboard, the 8.5 by 11 dimension. This black line, basically, this box, is the live area. Anything outside of it will not be printed, will not translate into a file for After Effects if you're doing animation or motion graphics work. So anything that is within that boundary is going to be printed and accepted by After Effects. So if you're doing a poster and you're just doing one, and it's just maybe something you're doing for a friend or a family member or whatever, you might just only need one artboard. But if perhaps you have a client who's looking for some options, some variations. Or maybe you need to give variations. You need to do one artboard that's 8.5 by 11 and a second artboard that's larger. Then we can get into multiple artboards in the same document. And in the past with Illustrator, if you wanted to do this, you'd have to just either create crop areas or just multiple documents. I'm going to close this for now, go back into new, and just show you what happens if I up my number of artboards to 2. When I go into 2, I have some options here to the right, which basically is what is the arrangement of the artboards as far as how they're numbered and how they're laid out on in your workspace. This is like a left to right, and then we'll go back down to another new row, or this could be top to bottom, sort of doing a different sort of zigzag, kind of like an N, or we can just do only rows or just columns. Or you can click this thing to change from right to left. So you can see the little arrows kind of change when you click on this thing. For whatever reason, maybe you want to go in reverse. Now with 2 artboards, I have also the option of spacing. How far apart do you want those artboards to be from each other? And we're in the land of points here, and they're the same as pixels. So this will be, a pretty small space between 2 artboards that are 612 points wide by 792 points tall. But if I change it to pixels, now we kind of get an idea. Here's pixels, so it's 20 pixels. Or if I go to inches, we've got our 8.5 by 11, and the spacing between them will be just slightly greater than 1/4 of an inch, which is funky. Why wouldn't they just make it 1/4 of an inch? That's a pretty good rounded increment. Anyways, now if I hit OK, here's my document. My work area has 2 artboards in it. They're both the same size, 8.5 by 11s, separated by a slightly larger than 1/4 of an inch. This would be handy if you're dealing with a multiple page document, so maybe you have a front and a back for your flyer or your brochure, or you're doing a multiple page spread or something like that. You could work with artboards this way. Artboards, when you set up multiple artboards in the new window, they're all the same size. But in a little bit I'll show you artboards via the artboard tool, where you could set up any size artboards that you want to give yourself some variation. And that should make sense once we get there. I'll close this one more time, go to File, New, and you can give yourself as many artboards as you want out of this business. And when you're setting up a multiple artboard piece, it doesn't have to be right away. I could start with one because there is an artboard tool. Alright, so should I talk about bleed right now? No, I'm not going to talk about bleed. We're going to come back to this later in the semester when we actually do some preparation for print. So I'm just going to start now with one artboard. I'm going to use my print setting of a letter size, 8.5 by 11. And the last thing that I'll look at before we leave is the orientation. Do you want a portrait or a landscape? And as soon as you click on landscape versus portrait, it just flip-flops your width and your height. So now with a landscape document, it's going to be wider than it is tall, but it's still the same dimensions as a piece of paper. It's basically just taking that piece of paper and turning it outside so that you can design your piece appropriately. I'm going to go back to portrait. Okay, so now that we've gotten out of the new document window, we actually have our document open in front of us. And this is when different windows And palettes are now filled up with options. I have colors in my swatches window, and things in my appearance window, and I actually see a layer in my layers window. When you have no document open, all those things were blank because you can't create without a document. So a little bit about the interface here. We have obviously a menu on top of our window. The Illustrator menu has the preferences. We went over those already. And you've got things like hide Illustrator and quit Illustrator. So that's how you can make sure that you've actually quit your application. If you're, for whatever reason, new to a Mac and you're used to a PC, this little red X seems like something that would normally you'd click on and it would actually quit your program. It actually just closes the window. It doesn't quit your program. You should get in the habit of actually going to quit. And that's something I'm just used to saying because I have students in my classrooms sitting at Macs who never have used one. But if you're in this online class, you've probably got a Mac and you've used it and you know these things. So there's no surprises, or else you're on a PC. So whatever. The file menu has all the things that you would expect under a file menu. Every program you've ever used has a file menu, and that has things like new, open, close, saving, saving as. And it's got a few other things that are less common to other programs, like place, dealing with some scripts, getting into our document setup, document color mode, or file info, whatever, and then printing. Most of these things you should have a pretty good idea of what they will do. Other things we'll get into as we move along. We have an edit menu. Has the typical stuff that you'd expect from an edit menu. Things like undo and redo, cutting, copying, pasting. There's some nice paste features in Illustrator where you can actually paste things in front of other objects or behind them, or exactly where it was when you copied it. Pasting on all artboards, that's a really great feature. We can do find and replacing. We can get into editing colors of things, color settings and profiles, learning about keyboard shortcuts or changing our keyboard shortcuts. These are things that I'm just really not going to get into in this class, but it's definitely there for you to peek and play with. One of the things that makes I'm just going to say a user. I feel like I just watched Tron or something. A good user is someone who doesn't ignore much about what the program or computer has to offer. It's a good user is someone who actually goes and says, well, what is a tracing preset? I might not know just by looking at it, but at least it's going to give me some sort of idea. What are color settings? I'm going to open it up and look. What are keyboard shortcuts? Let's see what happens. And it's that investigation and kind of detective work that makes, what am I going to say? Users a bit more brilliant, savvy. You can't break this stuff. Well, I don't know. Maybe you can. But really, you can't. Just by snooping around, it's going to help you feel more comfortable with where you're at and what you're working with. We have an object menu dealing with things that are actually on the artboard, shapes, text, whatever, things that we've drawn. We have transform, arranging. We can group things together, ungroup them. We can lock things. We'll get into all of this as we move along. We have a whole type menu dealing with fonts and sizes and changing case, whatever, all that business. Different selection options from the selection menu where you can select all or deselect or select the inverse or opposite of what's currently selected. kind of selecting things through the layering hierarchy, things above an object or below it, selecting things based on the same appearance or fill and color or stroke or weight. It's pretty awesome. And then in a whole effects menu where we can apply different effects, making things 3D or adding drop shadows, pucker and bloat, that sort of a thing. And then you've got Photoshop effects that are things you might recognize if you're a Photoshop user. Under View, we'll get into this all in more detail as well, but viewing things in outline mode will save you some processing power. You're not going to see any details, but you'll see the boundary of elements that are in your document. We can look at proof setup so that we kind of get an idea of how things will look if sent to a printer or press. You can hide things, show things. We can pull up rulers, get guides out, turn snapping off. I can't cover everything in this semester, but good detectives make good students, make good artists. And then under Window, basically everything down here that's listed in this list are different panels that you can pull up to help either deal with things like alignment or looking at graphic styles or getting information and so on. And we'll end up looking at various panels as we move through some other tutorials. Up high we have arrangement of windows. So if you had a bunch of different documents open, you could arrange them by cascading them or tiling them instead of them all being sort of opened as different windows kind of on top of each other. It's pretty helpful. Oh, and then workspace basically just changes the layout of panels and which panels are up. Right now, since I started fresh and I deleted my preferences and I opened up Illustrator a little bit ago, this is the default setup of my windows. But you can, and this is called a workspace. How everything is laid out right now, it's called a workspace. I could change things. I could move windows or close some of them or open some that I find more useful. And you can do something where you actually save a workspace. So if you find that some windows and panels are annoying and you use others more that aren't there, then you can actually arrange that the way you want and then save your workspace. And that would end up being named in this group, this whole list of workspaces here, which is pretty killer. And then there's a help menu, and I gotta say the help that Adobe provides is really excellent. If there's something that we're supposed to be doing in class and you may be a little unclear, maybe I didn't hit it well enough on the video or something like that, please do not shy away from the help. When you go to Illustrator Help, it will open up update available. Of course there's an update. No local content update. No, whatever, just go away. I just want to show this thing. This is the Adobe Community Help, and I believe that it's accessing the internet to get this stuff, so you want to make sure, I think you have a connection. It may actually be loaded on your computer, but a lot of times it takes you to the web browser and shows the stuff in a web browser, which doesn't mean it's using the internet, it just means that that's the way they set it up, but whatever. Here's my help center for Illustrator. I could go to Workspace and deal with workspace basics or customizing the workspace. Things that I just mentioned but didn't get into great detail. There's a whole world of detail here that since it's there and free, I'm not going to really go over it. Using multiple artboards, cool. Oh, what did he say about artboards? I don't remember, and I don't want to download or watch his boring movie anymore. So I'm going to go to Online Help and look at using multiple artboards. You go there and there's all this information. So the help that Adobe provides is stellar and super in-depth. So that's your menu. This area up here is a little option bar where, as we move into different things, there may be a few more options that pop up, but for the time being, we have an Adobe Bridge button, which would open Adobe Bridge, which is the program that helps you work between different Adobe programs. And then this is how to arrange our documents as different setups, different ways to look at multiple windows. I only have one window open right now, so that'll do me no good. But you should try it if you just want to open up a couple of windows and see what happens. There's some really nice options here. So if you're trying to compare work between logos or different files, you were trying to like move things between different files, that all works pretty well when you can lay them out. It's like it's like putting all your cards down the table to see what you have, instead of having to look at a stack and not really know what's underneath the next card and just kind of guessing. This is our control bar here. Underneath that, where we have different options for different tools or different things selected on our artboard. So this first thing is our fill color. This is our stroke color. This is our stroke weights. This is different options for brushes. Well, variable width profile. Yeah, there we go. So this is dealing with the line, the form of the line, the width of it, different brushes that you could use, different styles to apply to elements, the opacity of the artwork or object, and then we have document setup and preferences, just some links to these things that will open up the preferences window or get into our document setup, which has a few things that our new document window didn't have. But knock yourself out, look at it, and see if any of it could make sense for you. This is our toolbar, and it holds all of our tools that we'll be using to illustrate, make selections, transformations, really cool things happen. And notice at the bottom of the toolbar, there's our swatches again for our foreground. Nah, it's not foreground. I just went to Photoshop world there. Our fill and our stroke. And then on the right side of our screen, we have all of our different panels that are kind of tucked into different groups. So you have different tabs to deal with some of these different elements, swatches, brushes, symbols. You can tab between these things, stroke, gradient, transparency. We'll get into all these in detail later, appearance and graphic styles, layers, and artboards. At any time, these things could be pulled out and kept into their own little window. And a lot of times, if you double click on the name of the little tab for that palette, it'll give you a full reveal of that feature, or a collapsed sort of quick view, or just nothing at all. So color, you might not know that there's more to it than just this little spectrum. You might not know that. So get in the use of double clicking on these things to open up and see what's really there. This way I have a full cyan, magenta, yellow, and black slider, which gives me a bit more control than just dealing with this little bar or nothing at all. And anytime if you want to put tabs together, you can arrange them any way you want. You could say, oh, I don't want color guide. I never use color guide, so I'm going to pull it over here and just get rid of it. I'm going to put color back in with swatches. So now I've got color, swatches, brushes, and symbols together in their own palette window. So play with that. Just get used to doing it. Seriously, just play with it. Don't just watch my movie of me doing it. Get in there and do it yourself. So that's our little palette area, different windows. If you ever close one, so if I had layers and I accidentally closed it and it's not here anymore, all I have to do to get it up is go back to Window, find Layers, open it up, and it pops back out. I'll stick it in there with Artboards again. I never used the Artboards one. I'm going to close it and get rid of it. Kind of opens things up a little bit for me. It makes it less crowded, which is helpful. Our document window has the name at the top of it, of the document. I haven't named it or saved it yet, so it says Untitled 3. Tells me the percentage in which I'm viewing that document. It gives me the color profile, so this is a CMYK document, and I'm currently looking at it in preview mode. If I went to view outline, it would tell me that I'm in outline mode. So if things look really weird, not the way that they should, one of the telltale signs is on top of the window. It would be like, oh, I'm in outline mode. What did I do to get in outline mode? I must have pressed Command Y by accident. Command Y will go back and forth between preview and outline mode. And it's going to happen to you at some point. So be on your toes. At the bottom of the window on the left, you have a different zoom for this document. You can zoom way out. You can zoom way in, get up nice and close so you can make it fit on the screen. Those are basically things like zoom in, zoom out, fit artboard on window, fit all the window, actual size. Similar things that you can do down here up in the view menu. And then if you had multiple artboards, this is your sort of your artboard navigation at the bottom. If you had multiple artboards, you'd be able to choose the artboard you wanted to jump to or make active, or you could just click next or previous or go to the end or go to the beginning. And you can move through your artboards that way. And targeting artboards is pretty important, and we'll do that in a later video. So that's the interface and setting up a new document, and we'll wrap this one up.